Thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. For Alaska weather, I'm Emily Niebuhr. It is April 3rd, 2023. You can reach us at 1-855-937-4977. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. And our email is nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. Let's look at some headlines for today. First of all, we have widespread winter weather advisories for the lower Yukon, East Brooks Range. We also have in the Gulf, we have a low that's going to be bringing precipitation to the Panhandle Tuesday evening into Wednesday. Finally, for astronomers out there, we have the full pink moon of April this Wednesday evening, being called the pink moon because it's celebrating flowers in the lower 48, although we don't have too many up here yet in Alaska. We're going to see near to below temperatures through mid-April. Let's take a look at your hazardous weather. As you can see, we have widespread advisories, mainly for snow and blowing snow. So first, as we'll be showing you in a minute, the snow is going to be starting and the winds are going to be gusting first in the lower Yukon. But the main concern is going to be for travel through the Dalton Highway corridor. We are going to see about 4 to 8 inches of snowfall, and that advisory is going to be starting late tonight into Wednesday morning. So again, the greatest concern for travel is through the Brooks Range at this time, but keep posted. In addition, we're worried about some gusty winds and parts of the Alaska Range as well, although less snow expected than in the Brooks Range at this point. Okay, let's take a look at your spring river breakup outlook. This is from March 29th. Most of Alaska, again, we're expecting an average potential for spring river ice breakup and snowmelts flooding. Exceptions to this, we are expecting above average potential exists for upper Yukon River, upper Tanana River, and areas of the Copper River Basin. Below normal temperatures are expected through mid-April, and this will likely delay the onset of our typical river breakup and our snow melt. So again, below average temperatures across much of the region, especially through mid-April. So here's some important points as we prepare. Since it's delayed, we have time to prepare for breakup this year. So we can all do something to be a little bit more prepared for these types of events. So go ahead, stay safe and be proactive. You can move and safeguard property before high water and before the ice begins to break up. Make sure you have some extra food, batteries, and medical supplies ready and on hand. Also, be aware of your community safety plan and emergency shelter locations. And stay far and stay out of floodwaters and ice flows. They can be dangerous and unpredictable. So again, stay safe, be proactive. The time is to act now, and we have a little more extra time this year because of those cold temperatures. Okay, let's take a look at your current satellite image. Again, we have low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska. We also have that low pressure system weakening and moving towards the Kuskokwim and Yukon Delta. We also have a frontal system draped across central portions of Alaska, which again is going to be intensifying and bringing snow and blowing snow that we just mentioned for those advisories. So pretty active on the weather map today. Again, here's the low pressure system 1,001 millibars. This again is going to be moving inward to the north and west. And so again, we have this perfect frontal forcing mechanism across much of the mainland Alaska for the next 2 days. We also have a high pressure system in Siberia, bringing cooler temperatures over there. Finally, we have a low pressure system within the Gulf of Alaska. It's a 1,005 millibar. This again is going to be slowly drifting towards the panhandle there. Today, they're sitting under some nice high pressure, keeping conditions dry and partly cloudy in some locations. But again, that is going to be shifting over the next several days. Let's take a look at tonight. So for tonight, again, we have that high pressure is going to be maintaining its course. It's going to be fairly stagnant. We do have a low pressure system sneaking into the western Bering at 1,004 millibars. Meanwhile, along this frontal system, that low pressure system continues to move inland to the north and the west. So again, the winds and the snow are going to be starting in the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, and advisory conditions into Tuesday morning. And as that continues to progress, we're going to see widespread snow in the Brooks Range, and especially in those travel corridors like the Dalton Highway. That front stretches all the way into the Bering, so we're going to be seeing rain in the Aleutian Islands with a little snow mixed at higher elevations. Meanwhile, this low in the Gulf of Alaska continues to linger and is going to be slowly drifting in towards the Juneau and Panhandle area. So one more dry night tonight. As we move into Tuesday, again, this front is going to start bringing widespread rain and snow showers to the Panhandle. Again, we're expecting the rain and the snow to remain below advisory levels in the Gulf of Alaska, but definitely a shift in the weather pattern for them. Meanwhile, this frontal boundary, the low continues to move northward along it, but again, we're just seeing persistent snowfall as this moves inland towards the Brooks Range for much of Tuesday. So again, 4 to 8 inches of snow in those travel corridors. Finally, this low slowly begins to strengthen in the western Bering as it nudges up against this high pressure system on your Tuesday. For Wednesday, it continues to intensify and finally push a little inward, bringing more rain and snow into the central Bering. As we move towards the east, you can see the low near Juneau stays about the same intensity and continues to bring rain and snow along much of the coast. Meanwhile, this low pressure system continues to diminish across interior areas of Alaska and bringing just lighter snow showers for your Wednesday. Let's take a look at your temperatures due to all of these evolving active weather patterns. First of all, for Juneau, you can see we have lows for your Tuesday morning in your upper 20s to lower 30s. Meanwhile, in areas of South Central, we can see in our interior valleys, we have temperatures that are in the teens to upper 20s in the Anchorage area and the Kenai Peninsula area. As we get to Tuesday afternoon, you warm up into your mid-30s. And in the Juneau area, Panhandle, we're looking at temperatures in the lower 40s. But in the south, getting close to 50. We're starting to warm up. As we go into your Wednesday morning, again, we're looking at temperatures in the mid-30s in the Panhandle area and a little warmer in interior valleys as some lower clouds move in to your interior valley areas Wednesday morning, By Wednesday afternoon, again, we're seeing temperatures get into the 40s in much of South Central areas. Meanwhile, we're getting into the mid-40s in the Panhandle area as well. As we look at your Tuesday morning in the north, we're seeing some of this cold air coming up off the Arctic. So again, we're seeing below -10. So fairly cold temperatures and a -5 in the Seward Peninsula. We're going to warm up again in our springtime sunshine. See temperatures hit the teens by the afternoon, but still stay fairly close, barely getting to 0 in portions of northern Alaska. Another chilly morning Wednesday across across much of northern Alaska as that cold air pools in. Again, almost minus 15 as we get into your Wednesday afternoon. Still single digits below zero along the coast, but warmer to 20 in some of these interior places in some of that sunshine. For your low temperatures along the Bering, we are seeing temperatures in the mid-30s, and along the Alaska Peninsula, 30s as well for your Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, we are warming into the upper 30s and lower 40s. For your Wednesday morning, we are looking, again, warmer temperatures along the peninsula, lower 30s, and in the eastern and central Aleutians. And then by midday, we're looking at temperatures reaching the lower 40s and upper 30s. Let's take a look at your Climate Prediction Center outlook. Again, in the 6 to 10 day outlook, definitely looking at below normal temperatures across much of South Central, especially. Even all the way up, we're getting closer to near average as we go into the Arctic, but still cold temperatures in place, like we were talking about. And as we look in our rain or snowfall amounts, again, above average across much of Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, for Tuesday morning, we've got a wide swath of IFR here from the eastern Arctic coast, right on down across the western interior, and expanding here over the southwest part of the state, and then right on into the eastern Bering Sea, down to the Fox Islands. Marginal VFR Adak and Atka, but Pribilof's in the IFR zone, and then some more IFR towards Chimay-Attu. IFR, Kodiak Island, on up into western Prince William Sound and the east side of the Kenai Peninsula. Marginal VFR, Cook Inlet into the Mananuska-Susitna Valley, and holding on to some VFR early on here over the eastern interior, as well as all of the southeast coast and the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait. And then for the afternoon, this area shifts eastward here, still extending from the eastern Arctic coast, but a little farther eastward, and then down into Bristol Bay and improving here over the eastern Bering Sea. You can see VFR coming in to Nunivak Island and much of just about all the west coast here north of Nunivak Island, and areas of IFR over south central Alaska, mostly into Prince William Sound there in the Barren Islands, southern Kenai Peninsula, and some IFR now trying to push in toward, say, Elfin Cove and the North Gulf Coast, mostly marginal. Copper River Basin, marginal VFR, but the Upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country VFR. And for the morning Wednesday, continuing improvement here over the western part of the state with the colder air, higher pressure coming in, and still some IFR here at Kuskokwim Valley, western Alaska range, right on down along the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians. Otherwise, some IFR, North Slope, and areas of the Arctic coast, especially the east side there, down into the northern upper Yukon Valley, across the Porcupine River, and IFR, northern half of the Panhandle, better conditions down to the south. And then for the afternoon, continued improvement here, becoming VFR, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, much of the western into the central interior as this area of moisture slowly shifts eastward. And IFR, though, for the Copper River Basin down into the northern Panhandle areas, marginal VFR for the southern part of the southeast coast, and some IFR holding there over the eastern Arctic coast and North Slope to the eastern Brooks Range area. Good VFR into and off the coast here, but marginal by the time you get to the Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to Chimay-Attu. Look for mostly areas of mostly VFR for the passes, Anatuvik and Adigan. IFR for the day on Tuesday. Same thing for Lake Clark and Merrill. IFR flying both those passes there. In fact, the western Alaska range looks like it'll be IFR most of the day. Windy, IFR, a little bit better out the north side there into the valley, marginal VFR in the northern entrance. And for Isabel, marginal VFR, but VFR north of the mountains. Same thing for Mentasta, marginal VFR southern approach into the pass, and north of the mountains there, VFR. Tanita, mostly it'll be marginal VFR for Tanita, and for Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR to start, IFR to finish for the day, Tuesday. And the freezing levels here at the surface, just south of Nunivak Island here across southern Alaska, north of the Panhandle, 2,000 feet or 2,000 to 4,000 feet there up to about Kodiak Island. And for icing, moisture here pushing in toward the southeast coast. Could be some areas of isolated moderate mixed icing with some increasing chances of considerable moderate rime icing there along the central coast. And an area of isolated moderate rime icing here from the eastern Arctic coast with that area of moisture all the way down into northeast Bristol Bay and the Aleutian Range area. And for the jet stream, well, not much here on this chart, kind of a southwest flow here, very cold upper trough there off the eastern Arctic coast, another one back out here. And so the main jet with all the cold air south of almost off the chart here. And so moving on to 9,000 feet, not too bad wind-wise here at all. Southwest 35 knots in the interior around southwest of Kodiak Island, west 45 there over the southwest Bering, and 35 into the Panhandle. 3,000 feet, a little bit stronger here, south-southeast, 55 knots there for the Panhandle. Not too bad elsewhere around the state. So moving on to turbulence. Look for considerable moderate turbulence here for the southeast coast with those stronger winds in that system up along the North Gulf Coast as well, maybe in the southern Prince William Sound area. Pretty smooth over the interior. Could be an area of isolated moderate turbulence there right through here, especially over the mountains of the Brooks Range. Otherwise, pretty smooth out to the west. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the ice edge and marine forecast.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
We're averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's
there's different types of impacts on communication systems. And the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar, and ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot. We've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the ice and marine portion of today's weather forecast. As you can see, for current conditions in the Chukchi Sea and northern Bering Sea, we have widespread sea ice coverage. Not the case as we go further south. The sea ice edge continues to erode and move further north away from St. Paul and St. George Islands. And in the Bristol Bay areas as well, you can see reduced sea ice coverage. Let's look at your marine forecast. We're going to start out looking at the Panhandle. We have this nice coastal jet for your Tuesday marine conditions, and we have winds 20 to 30 knots all along the Gulf Coast, with the highest waves up in the north near Yakutat up to 11 feet. As we go into our interior areas, there's more sheltering. So we're seeing winds of about 10 to 15 knots, highest winds near Ketchikan of about 3 feet. As we go into your Wednesday marine forecast, that low pressure system moves closer into the Juneau area. And so we're starting to see this stronger low level jet right along the coast. We have 35 to 40 knots, definitely in your gale force zone, and waves up to 14 feet. So definitely be aware as you travel in Wednesday conditions, windier and wavier than Tuesday. Same story as we go in more sheltered interior areas. We're looking at up to 9-foot waves near Ketchikan. We're also seeing winds up to 30 knots, a little more sheltered near Skagway, but still some gusty winds. As we go towards your North Gulf Coast for Tuesday, again, lighter winds and waves, but still we're looking at about 7-foot waves, 30-knot winds. In your Prince William Sound area, we have winds up to 15 knots, waves 3 feet. In the Cooklet area, we have 20 knots and waves up to 5 feet in the southern portions of Cook Inlet. Wednesday, we are looking at slightly higher waves. We're seeing about 8 feet. Also seeing an increase in the winds as out of the gap flow. Meanwhile, Prince William Sound continues to have more sheltered conditions of about 10 knots and waves 2 feet. As we go towards the Alaska Peninsula for your Tuesday, we have winds ranging from about 15 to 10 knots and waves from 6 to 4 feet along the Pacific area and 3 to 4 in the Bering and Bristol Bay areas. Winds will have more of a northwesterly direction on Wednesday, but still ranging about 15 knots and waves about 4 feet. For Tuesday, along the Aleutians chain, we have about 20 knots in the Chemie area and 10 to 15 in the rest of the Aleutians. Waves about 5 to 6 feet. However, by Wednesday, we start to see that low pressure system move into the western Bering. And so we're starting to see winds increasing to about 30 knots near gale force with waves up to 11 feet. Eastern central Aleutians not quite as impacted by that system quite yet on Wednesday. So we're looking at winds about 20 knots and waves to about 4 feet. Let's take a look along your ice edge. You can see on Tuesday, we're going to have winds of 25 knots and waves 6 feet. As we go on to the ice edge, again, similar wind conditions of about 25 knots from the north and up to about 6-foot waves near the Bristol Bay and near the Pribilof Islands. For your Wednesday, a little less wind along your ice edge. We're looking at about 10 to 15 knots in ice areas. And along the ice edge, again, about 25 knots and waves about 6 feet again. So fairly similar conditions. Winds up to about 3 feet in your Bristol Bay areas and about waves up to 4 feet, St. Paul, St. George Island. As we go up to your Arctic coast areas in the Chukchi Sea and northern Bering, we're going to be looking at 20 knots from the north, basically all along the coast for your Tuesday. Meanwhile, along the Arctic coast, we're going to be seeing variable winds 10 to 15 knots. By Wednesday, again, northerly flow about 15 knots and fairly variable along your Arctic coast as well, 10 to 15 knots. So again, here's a quick recap of where your low pressure systems are. Again, we have this low near Shemya and one in the Gulf.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.